So remember, the Bill of Rights, all about protecting us from a tyrannical government. The best way to understand the Bill of Rights is just think of it as a list of government no-nos. Alright? Limitations on our government, things they cannot do. The Fifth and Sixth Amendment, among others, but especially those two, are outline rights of those who are accused of crimes. That could happen to any one of us anytime. Being accused of a crime doesn't necessarily mean you did it. In fact, it really doesn't matter whether you did it or not. It's just what the government can prove in court. Right, so that refers to due process, right? The government can punish us, but only once they have proven that we've committed a crime. Right, and then the Sixth Amendment is more rights of the accused. So look up on the screen or look in your Bill of Rights at the Sixth Amendment. There's several rights in here. Who's gonna be our bad guy today? Be the new bad guy.
Me, Cassidy, please, me, Cassidy,
Alright.
pick Cassidy.
Leah, you're the bad guy today. So you have been arrested and charged with the murder of Mr. McGillicuddy. Mr. McGillicuddy's the victim, Leah is the suspect. But, remember, she is presumed to be innocent. She does not have to prove she's innocent. The court already presumes that. It's up to the government to prove her guilt. Right, so this outlines some more of her rights in Amendment 6. First of all, she has a right to a speedy and public trial. Speedy is kind of vague. It doesn't give a specific time frame. So we've interpreted speedy to mean, well, just as soon as we can get it going. Alright, and that might not really be that speedy. It could be up like a year. Sometimes even more than that. And the reason for that is, well, there's only so many courtrooms and other people have a right to a speedy trial and they're in line in front of you. So you gotta wait. Another good reason is both sides. The government has to get their evidence prepared. Fingerprints and DNA and eyewitnesses and video cameras footage and whatever. And Malia, her lawyers, want to get her evidence gathered. Alright, eyewitnesses who say she didn't do it or whatever. So, that explains why sometimes there might be a high profile crime and it's on Wink News every day for a couple of days, and then we kind of forget all about it, and like a year later, they say the trial is going to start. Like, that happened a long time ago. We're just now getting around to the trial. That's what we call speedy. Alright, the trial also has to be public. A public trial means the government can't try us in secret for obvious reasons, right? What if the government could accuse us and put us on trial and not let anybody see what happens in the trial? Kind of easy to punish us for something we didn't do. That's tyranny. So we have public trials. Everything that happens in a trial, every word spoken is written down and becomes a matter of public record forever. So we can always look back forevermore and know exactly what happened in that courtroom. And it's open for everybody. That explains, there's criminal trials going on in Lee County courthouses in downtown Fort Myers right now. Alright, there's people on the witness stand giving testimony. It's open to the public. You can go anytime you want. Alright, there's no ticket, there's no invitation. You don't have to pay. It's a public trial. That's what we mean. Government can't hide anything from us when they're accusing us of a crime. I suggest you do that sometime. It's like watching a courtroom drama in a movie play out in real life. Now, if you're in there, you have to behave. You can't talk to the person next to you. You can't play games on your cell phone, all that. The judge will throw you out of the courtroom. If you have an outburst, they'll have you arrested and charged with contempt of court. Right? But it's open to you. Now, Now, if it's full, you can't stand in the aisles, there's only so many chairs, when it's full, it's full. But it's public. Malia is entitled, has the right to an impartial jury. The jury are the people who are gonna decide her guilt or innocence. Would it be a fair trial if somebody on the jury was Mr. McGillicuddy's family member? No, that wouldn't be fair. Alright, also, would it be fair if Malia's mom was on the jury? No, that wouldn't be a fair trial, at least not to the McGillicuddy family. Right, so it has to be a jury that is impartial, they're unbiased. They don't know Mr. McGillicuddy, they don't know Malia, they're just other citizens in this community are gonna listen to the evidence. If the evidence proves she's guilty, they're gonna say she's guilty. If there's not enough evidence to prove it, they're gonna say not guilty. That's simple. They don't have anything for or against Malia. That's called a fair trial. Any questions on that part? That all makes sense, doesn't it? We have a good justice system. You would want an impartial jury if you were accused of a crime. It also says her trial, in Sixth Amendment says her trial has to take place in the community where the crime was committed. So if it was in Lee County, it's gonna be in the Lee County courts. If it was in Hendry County, the Hendry County courts, and so on. There is an exception to that, though. If we, for some reason, don't think she can get a fair trial in Lee County, we can move it somewhere else in Florida. Maybe it was on Wink News every day for the past year, and everybody in Wink News, or everybody in Lee County has already decided she's guilty. Well, that's not fair to her. So we're gonna move it somewhere else in Florida where it wasn't such a big story. And the people will be less likely to have heard about it. So we can have an impartial jury and a fair trial. Any questions so far? Sixth Amendment also says that Malia has the right to confront her accusers. So if you ever noticed on all those courtroom scenes on the movies, in any courtroom, the witness stand faces the accused person. Malia will be in attendance at her trial, right? She'll be sitting there, and she gets, and if, let's say I'm gonna be one of the witnesses, the state of Florida calls Mr. Kiefer, I swear to tell the truth, whole truth, all that good stuff. All right, and then they say, Mr. Kiefer, can you tell us what happened? And I say, well, I was out that night and I saw Malia kill Mr. McGillicuddy. Right? And I've already testified, I'm telling the truth. Well, I have to face her. All right? The state of Florida can't say, well, somebody said, we're not gonna say who, that they saw her do it. That's not good enough, is it? Imagine that was you that was on trial. That's not fair to Malia. They can't even say, well, Mr. Kiefer told us. No. I have to actually say it in the courtroom, face to face to Malia. She has a right to confront her accusers. And that means her lawyers get to ask me questions too. I say, oh, so you say you saw that, huh, Mr. Kiefer? Do you wear glasses? Well, sometimes I don't see too well. Oh, they try to make my testimony not be very good, right? That's part of her Sixth Amendment rights. She gets to confront her accusers. We also have exceptions to that. If the witness testifying is a child, and they might be afraid to tell the truth if Malia's staring them down in the courtroom. So in that case, sometimes we will let the children testify in a separate room and we'll video their testimony and then we'll show it to the jury. And that's still fine. Because what's the point of our justice system? We're trying to find the truth, right? We want to know what actually happened. Alright, so we want the witnesses, the little children that might happen to be witnesses, we want them to feel free to tell the truth, what they saw, not be intimidated. But if you're a grown adult, you just need to grow up and tell everybody what you saw. Finally, Sixth Amendment says Malia is entitled to a lawyer. Hey, we all got lives, even though we might be educated, even though we've watched lots of courtroom dramas on TV, we don't know all the ins and outs of the law. That's what lawyers do. They went to law school, they got law degrees, they passed the bar exam. They know everything they need to know to represent Malia, so she's entitled to a lawyer, and that's kind of part of those Miranda rights. When she gets arrested, not only was she informed she has a right to remain silent and all that, what does the end of it say? You have a right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one, what will happen? One will be provided for you. Right? In other words, the taxpayers of Florida will pay for your lawyer. There are people who that's their job. They are court-appointed lawyers. And they get assigned defendant, and someone will be assigned to Malia. She could hire her own lawyer, or she could just take the free lawyer. But whatever it is, her lawyer's job is not to get her off. Her lawyer's job is to represent her rights, to make sure that the government doesn't violate her rights in their attempt to find her guilty. So if her lawyer's doing her job and the government does something wrong, her lawyer will tell the judge, objection, Your Honor. That violates my client's Fifth Amendment or Fourth Amendment or Sixth Amendment rights or whatever. Riley?
Why would you buy an attorney when you just get the free one?
Well, that old adage, you get what you pay for, right? Is a meal at Taco Bell the same as a meal at Ruth Chris Steakhouse?
But why don't they know the same stuff?
There's talent involved, right? Is quarterback for ECS the same as quarterback for New England Patriots or whatever, right? There's talent and lawyers. Some have more talent than others. Not necessarily. Your court-appointed lawyer could be top-notch. Or maybe they're a court-appointed lawyer because nobody ever wanted to hire them. Right? So, if I'm ever accused of a crime, I'm gonna hire my own. But you can do whatever you want. You can go with the free one if you want, Riley. And then there's good ones. There's good ones. They've dedicated their lives to protecting people's lives. Chrissy?
Do you have to take an oath to be a lawyer?
Yep.
Can the court-appointed lawyer, can they like say no to the case?
The lawyer?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they can. And especially if like they knew Malia, or they knew Mr. McGillicuddy, or whatever, they could say no. Or just on other moral grounds, like I'm not taking this one. Malia's such an evil person, I don't wanna represent her. Any questions on the Sixth Amendment? Rights of the accused. Alright, Seventh Amendment, that won't take us long. So far, all we've described are criminal cases, like in our silly example, it's the state of Florida versus Malia. Alright, the state of Florida is the one who's accusing her of murder. Well, the Seventh Amendment has to do with civil cases, not criminal cases. No crime has been committed. So let's say that Jet backed out of his driveway and backed over Hannah's mailbox. And Hannah says, you need to pay me for, get a new mailbox. And Jet says, no, I ain't paying you. Your mailbox was too close to my driveway. Well, Hannah might decide to sue him. She wants some money. That's called a civil case. Nobody's committed a crime, right? She just feels like she's been done wrong. So it's up to the judicial branch to figure it out. Alright, well the Seventh Amendment says, if the amount of money they're arguing over is greater than $20, they could request a jury listen to the evidence and decide whether or not Jet has to pay for the mailbox or not. But just so you know, usually we don't do it that way. We go to small claims court and they both decide. They're not gonna let the jury decide. They'll both tell their story to the judge and the judge will decide without a jury. Now we do have jury trials in civil cases, but it's usually for large, very large amount of money. Then we'll let a jury decide. But they could request a jury. We just usually don't. Any questions on that?
Could you deny
Nope, that's what the Seventh Amendment says, it can't be denied a jury if it's greater than $20. All right, Eighth Amendment, spend a little bit more time on this one. This one's talked about a lot. Obviously, if we have had our due process, we've had our day in court, and Malia has been proven beyond a reasonable doubt, the jury said she's guilty, well then can the government punish her? Yeah, it sure can. She's had her due process. They could take her money, that's called a fine. They could take her freedom, that's called prison. They could even take her life, that's called the death penalty, right? Depending on the severity of the crime. Right, that we get, but what they can't do is punish her in any way that's cruel or unusual. Look what it says, that's exactly what it says. Protects us from the government punishing us in a cruel or unusual way. But it doesn't define what does cruel and unusual mean. So whose job would it be to figure that out?
Lawyers.
The judges and the justices.
Yeah, the judicial branch, ultimately the Supreme Court, to interpret the Eighth Amendment. And there's been multiple Eighth Amendment cases on what is cruel and unusual and what isn't. Alright, so in this cartoon here, I just picked one, that's a guillotine, chops your head off, the government can't chop our heads off. Alright, that's the old-fashioned stocks from like the Puritan days. So we're not gonna put someone in the stocks and publicly humiliate them, the bell tower shops or whatever, or everybody walk by and see them. Alright. They can punish, but not in a cruel way, not in an unusual way. And ultimately, the Supreme Court decides what is and isn't against the Eighth Amendment. So when the Eighth Amendment comes up a lot is in death penalty cases. There are many Americans who think the death penalty is cruel and unusual. The Supreme Court has ruled that no, it's not. Right? The way it works is every state gets to make their own laws, we know that, right? Well, some states have death penalties, some states don't. The death penalty in any state that has it, it's always only for the most horrific types of murders. So someone found guilty of murder might not get the death penalty. It's only for capital offenses. That means it wasn't just somebody got mad and killed somebody. Like, there was a road rage and Malia just lost her temper and killed Mr. McGillicuddy because she's hot-tempered. Alright. She would have to pay for that crime. She would get sent to prison, but she could not be executed for that. It would have to be premeditated or planned out. Like, that's evil, right? You decide to kill somebody, you take steps to do it, and then you actually do it. You planned ahead and you killed somebody. That takes a whole different kind of evil. That's a whole total disrespect for human life. So the thinking on the death penalty, the reason the Supreme Court said it's not cruel and unusual is that it is actually supporting and upholding the dignity of human life by executing murderers. Because if they had such low regard for human life, well then they're gonna have to forfeit theirs. And by doing that, that shows that as a society, we really do value human life. We value it so much that if you don't, well then the government's gonna take yours. A lot of people disagree with that. Right? But it doesn't matter. It's just like anything else that we like or don't like about the Constitution. Tomorrow we'll talk about some amendments I don't like. Does that matter? Oh, we're a nation of laws. It doesn't matter if Mr. Keeper likes them or not. We're gonna follow them. Some people don't like the Second Amendment. Some people don't like the way the Supreme Court's interpreted the Eighth Amendment. It doesn't matter. We're a nation of laws. It's in the Constitution. I think, well, I know, the state that executes the most murderers, by far, not even a close second, is Texas. Don't mess with Texas. Second place, it's a distant second, but usually Year to year, it might vary, but usually it's Florida. Usually second place. We do our executions in one little podunk town, only one town where we carry out our death penalty, and that's in a little town called Stark. It's in the middle of the state, not near any interstates, on State Highway 301. I've been through this town a lot. It's north of Ocala, I think, middle of the state. Not much there, except a prison with a death chamber. And every time someone is executed in Florida, which is several times a year, Stark's economy does well. All their hotel rooms get rented and their restaurants are packed because people from all over the country that are opposed to the death penalty will come and exercise their First Amendment rights of freedom of assembly and protest and speech, and they'll hold signs and they'll chant and they'll protest the death penalty. They have a right to do that, right? It's good for the Stark economy besides. But it never makes any difference. That person's gonna be executed. At the death chamber, we used to use, for many decades, we used the electric chair. We actually had a name for our electric chair. In Florida, we called it Old Sparky. Executed dozens and I don't know how many people over the decades. And like any other piece of equipment or machinery, it wore out, and after a while there was one execution that didn't work right. See, the law says that electricity shall be run through their body until such time as they are dead. Well, we flipped the switch, gave them a jolt, but it didn't kill them. Well, we gotta follow the law. It says until such time as they are dead, so we had to give them another zap. I think it took like 3 tries before it finally killed them. That's not good. So we needed to get a new one, so the taxpayers of Florida, we bought a brand new electric chair. But then we never used it, because right then we also changed the law in Florida. And now the method of execution is lethal injection. Every state gets to decide their method as well. In Florida, we use lethal injection. That means they're gonna be strapped to a gurney and given 2 shots, one to sedate them and one to stop their heart. There's actually a plexiglass window and a seating area, so members of Mr. McGillicuddy's family, for closure or whatever, can see justice carried out. They could decide to view the execution. Now, not just you and I can't go, but members of the family could. Or people that have an interest in the case, specific interest in the case, could attend. They don't have to. But remember that that was their loved one that was murdered in probably a very horrific way on purpose, or they would have never gotten the death penalty. So they might want to see justice carried out, and they have that right. Person being executed gets to make their last statement. Anything you want to say. Sometimes they'll pray or apologize and cry, tell the family they're sorry. Sometimes they'll just sneer, whatever, it's up to them. They can say whatever they want, and they get a last meal. Right, so you might want to plan ahead in case you're ever in that situation, what you would take as your last meal. I'm going with biscuits and gravy. I've decided. They'll serve you anything you want. Riley?
Why are they so worried about like a peaceful death for them when most of the time the people they killed were killed in horrific ways?
Just because of the 8th Amendment. We can show respect for life by taking their life, but that doesn't mean we have to make them suffer necessarily.
I mean, they made the people they killed suffer, so.
Yeah. But that, I mean, then it's borderline not justice, it's revenge. We don't have a revenge system, we have a justice system. By the way, since you brought that up, the Supreme Court heard a case not too many years ago where somebody on death row, their lawyers appealed and said that lethal injection, it wasn't Florida, I think it was Kentucky. They said lethal injection is cruel and unusual because it causes pain. Like the first shot that sedates them is fine, but the second shot that kills them is actually extremely painful, but they don't show it because the first shot sedated them. And they even had lawyers testify before the Supreme Court. I'm sorry, they had doctors testify that that is actually a painful death. And the Supreme Court said, we believe you. You're doctors. We agree, it hurts. That didn't make it cruel or unusual, which basically means our government can inflict pain. That's not cruel or unusual in certain punishments, like the death penalty. So, in other words, our Supreme Court says it's okay to make it hurt. I don't know if it does or not. I'm not a doctor. I've never experienced it.
How would they know it hurts if they sedate them?
Doctor testimony. Yeah, I don't know. Not saying it does or not, I'm just saying what they argue. And every state has their own way. Some states, gas chamber, most of them are lethal injection now. Back in the day, it was hanging. Right? Sometimes we think it's weird that they would let people watch the execution. Well, think about the old westerns we've seen, right? They do it in the town square. Let everybody in town, not just the victim's family, come and see it. And then you see the murderer swinging on the rope, kind of a deterrent, right? Everybody else in town, you know why that happened to them, right? Because they disrespected life and they killed somebody. So maybe you want to think twice before you kill somebody. They used it as an actual deterrent. So sometimes you drive through Stark late at night on my way to Jacksonville, street lights might flicker a little bit, and then you know, got another one. No, I just made that up. That's not, that does not happen. That's sick and twisted. What is wrong with you? Any questions on the Eighth Amendment? Not just the death penalty, but the Eighth Amendment, no cruel and unusual punishment. All right, the Ninth Amendment is kind of interesting. I like the Ninth Amendment. Basically, here's what it says. Just because the Constitution doesn't spell it out, doesn't mean you don't have the right to do it. It's kind of like they were writing the Bill of Rights and they said, all right, we got religion, we got free speech, we got right to own a gun, due process, fair trial. Think we got them all? And they're like, well, probably not everything. So let's write the Ninth Amendment and put it in there. And that's exactly what it says. For example, do you have a right to take a breath? Well, yeah, but it's not written specifically in the Bill of Rights. It doesn't have to be. That's what we're saying in the Ninth Amendment. Just because it isn't spelled out doesn't mean you don't have the right to do it. Any questions on that one? All right, 10th Amendment, last one in the Bill of Rights. This one also gets a lot of attention. The 10th Amendment is often referred to as the States' Rights Amendment. What do we mean by that? Well, we know people have rights. Well, guess what? So do states. Where does it say that? 10th Amendment. Here it is word for word. Now this is where English class and sentence structure and reading comprehension come in. It can be very kind of confusing, but it's not that complicated. This is basically what it says. If the Constitution says that the U.S. government is in charge of it, well then that settles it. But if it doesn't say that, then it's up to the states. If the Constitution doesn't say that U.S. government's in charge, then the state governments are in charge. Where does it say that? 10th Amendment. It also says, if the Constitution says a state can't do it, well then that's settled, we understand that. But if it doesn't say a state can't do it, then the state can do it. States' rights. And then the last few words of the 10th Amendment, or the people. In other words, if the Constitution doesn't say we can't do it, then we can do it. We have the right. Any questions on the 10th Amendment, States' Rights Amendment? All right, that's the Bill of Rights. They all came at the same time, first 10 amendments. What year was that again? Jessica?
1791.
1791. Designed to protect us from government tyranny. And then, since then, there's 17 more amendments, right? 11 through 27. So, over 200 years has gone by, and we've only changed the Constitution 17 times. So what does that prove? Well, the fact that we changed it 17 times proves that it's doable, right? The fact that we only changed it 17 times proves that it's not that easy to do. So you remember, Article 5 tells us how to change the Constitution. Remember, it's a pretty high threshold. You need 2/3 of the House, 2/3 of the Senate, and 3/4 of the states, which means it has to be a very popular idea with widespread support before it will qualify to be a constitutional amendment. Also, if you notice, next to the rest of the amendments, there's a year of when it was finally added to the Constitution. And just so you know, it's usually a reaction. Most constitutional amendments are a reaction to something going on in our country. In other words, something happens and we go, you know what? We should change the Constitution, clarify that. And we make an amendment. In a lot of cases, the amendments are us making a more perfect union, like we set out to do in the preamble. We're actually getting better and better at living up to the ideals set forth in the Declaration of Independence. So let's start on Amendment 11. First of all, what year? Chrissy?
1795.
1795. So just 4 years after the Bill of Rights, we went ahead and changed it again. It's not a big deal. It has to do with lawsuits involving states. It has to be in the court of that state. Big deal. Let's go to the 12th one. What year? Riley. 1804. Now this one is kind of interesting. Changed slightly the way we elect presidents and vice presidents. We still use the Electoral College, we always have, but at first we did it kind of like this, like first place was president, second place was vice president. That got a little awkward. Could you imagine in 15 days, let's say Joe Biden becomes president and Donald Trump would be his vice president? Would that be a good working relationship?
Nope.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, that wouldn't work out. Well, that actually happened. In our early days of our history, the president and vice president were the guys who ran against each other in the election. And they didn't have any better working relationship than Trump and Biden did. They were political enemies. So we said, you know what, we should probably change that. So one way that we address that is now we elect vice presidents along with the president. So on like the Florida ballot, there's one bubble next to the names President Trump, Vice President Pence. So if you vote for Trump as president, you are voting for Pence for vice president. There's not a separate bubble. And if you vote Joe Biden for president, you are voting for Kamala Harris as vice president. Any questions on the 12th Amendment? All right, the next three, 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment, a lot of times these are learned together. They're kind of like grouped together. They're called the Reconstruction Amendments. It'll be something we learn next semester. Reconstruction is actually a time period in American history, the time period right after the Civil War. And another fact you'll learn next semester, the Civil War ended in 1865. What year was the 13th Amendment added? Chrissy?
1865.
1865. So the Civil War ends, and then right away, we go and change the Constitution. And then when's the 14th Amendment? What year?
1868.
1868, just 3 years later. What about 15th Amendment? Yeah?
1870.
1870, just 2 years after that. So within 5 years, we added 3 amendments to the Constitution, 13th, 14th, and 15th. All right, they all had to do with the massive changes that took place after the Civil War. We know the underlying cause of the Civil War was slavery, and Abe Lincoln, our first Republican president, and the North won the war, right? The Confederate South, where slavery was legal, they lost. Slavery, the slaves have been set free. We could have just had Congress pass a law and make slavery illegal, but we took it all the way to the Constitution. And we made slavery not just illegal, we made slavery unconstitutional with the 13th Amendment. The 13th Amendment is a famous one. It abolished slavery in the United States once and for all. Not just illegal, unconstitutional. Any questions? It's now unconstitutional for one person to own another person. Any questions on the 13th Amendment? All right, to help you understand the 14th Amendment, let's just pretend that every one of us in this room, we were slaves. And then the Civil War ends. The 13th Amendment is passed. Are we slaves anymore? No. If we're not slaves, that means we're free. Right? All right, so if we were born in America, and we're not property, we're not slaves, we're free people, well then doesn't that make us citizens? Yeah. But see, in the post-Civil War, Confederate, still racist South, they said, yeah, well, maybe slavery's illegal. But you former slaves aren't gonna be citizens. Well, oh yes, we are. Oh yes, we are, because the 14th Amendment, well, I don't have a slide on the 14th Amendment. 14th Amendment, among other things, if you look at it, it's a very long amendment. There's a lot in there. But for our purposes today, what you need to know is the 14th Amendment gave black Americans citizenship. 13th Amendment abolished slavery, 14th Amendment gives us citizenship. Because after all, we were born in America. It's also where we get the ideas, and even nowadays, for birthright citizenship. Any questions on the 14th Amendment? 15th Amendment, 2 years after that. Again, all of us were slaves. The 13th Amendment gave us our freedom. 14th Amendment gave us citizenship. 15th Amendment gives us voting rights. If we're citizens, we should have all the rights of citizens, right? Including voting. Should go without saying. But again, in the post-Civil War, Confederate, still racist South, many people were saying, all right, well, maybe slavery's abolished, and maybe our black neighbors have citizenship, but we're not letting them vote. Yes, you are letting us vote. 15th Amendment gives voting rights to all citizens, regardless of race, even if we used to be slaves. Citizens are citizens, and citizens get to vote. And that was in 1870. Of course, this is 2020, so that makes this year kind of special. It's the 150th anniversary of the passage of the 15th Amendment. 150 years since black Americans got the right to vote. That is male citizens. Sorry girls, you still didn't have a right to vote in 1870. That's coming with a later constitutional amendment we'll get to tomorrow. And that one happened to come in 1920. So that makes this year, 2020, special for that reason too. Yeah, it's the 150th anniversary of black voting rights. It's the 100th anniversary of women voting rights. We'll look at that one in more detail tomorrow. Any questions on any of the Reconstruction Amendments, 13th, 14th, and 15th? 3 amendments added in 5 years. 13th Amendment, abolish slavery. 14th Amendment, black citizenship. 15th Amendment, black voting rights. Making us a more perfect union, like we said in the preamble. More and more living up to our ideals We declared in the Declaration of Independence that we're all created equal and given God-given rights. All right. 16th Amendment. What year? Riley?
1913.
1913. So look at that. What was that? 43 years went by before we changed the Constitution again. 16th Amendment is not one of my favorites. This one's known as the Income Tax Amendment. This is the one where it says that the government can take our property, our hard-earned money. We earn it, and the government can take it in income taxes. Before the 16th Amendment, that would have been unconstitutional. Because the 15th Amendment, 14th Amendment says the government can't take our money, unless we're found guilty of a crime, due process. But the 16th Amendment says yes, they can, so now it is constitutional. They can tax us on our income. Before that, taxes were paid by states. Now most of our government money comes from us, individual income taxpayers. Doesn't seem to bother you now, I can tell by looking at your face, but you wait until you earn an income. It will bother you, because you know that was your efforts that earned that money. And now you gotta pay it to the government. They're gonna decide how to spend it instead of you deciding how to spend the money you earn. It's annoying. I don't like it, but does that matter? Nope, it's in the Constitution. Some people don't like the Second Amendment. I say, well, that's too bad. It's in the Constitution. I don't like the 16th Amendment. Well, for me, that's too bad. It's in the Constitution, right? We're a nation of laws. Any questions on the 16th? Income Tax Amendment. 17th Amendment. What year? 1913. Look at that. 2 amendments in the same year. I call this 1913 worst year ever, because I don't like the 17th Amendment either. Doesn't matter what I like though. Alright, 17th Amendment changed the way we elect senators. We know how we elect senators. We vote on them, right? We the people elect them directly. Why do we do that? Because that's what the 17th Amendment says. But before 1913, we the people did not elect our senators. That's not what the Founding Fathers set up when they wrote Article 1 of the Constitution, outlining the bicameral Congress. See, the way it was originally designed is we would elect people to go to Tallahassee, our state legislators, and then that group of people would choose 2 Floridians to go to Washington, D.C. and represent the state of Florida as senators. So in other words, that was the point of the bicameral Congress. The House of Representatives would be elected by we the people, and they would do we the people's business. The U.S. Senate would be elected by the state legislators, and they would do the state's business. That was the beauty of the bicameral Congress. But the 17th Amendment changed that. Bad idea in my opinion, but it doesn't matter, does it? It's the Constitution. Now we directly elect the senators ourselves, which means the Senate isn't that much different than the House of Representatives. To me, it kind of ruins the whole point of having a bicameral Congress. But, like it or not, it's in the Constitution. I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. Right.
Wouldn't it be like a better thing since we have a direct choice as to who we can choose, instead of choosing to send someone out there, we're gonna go